What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Back in early May, I come out with my initial rankings. I do it every single year right after the NFL draft. Early May, I come out with my rankings. And mostly, I leave it alone. I don't mess with it too much. I like to kind of leave my initial rankings as they are. Of course, Dalvin Cook has to get moved. He can't be the RB15 after getting cut from the Vikings. I then decide to revisit the rankings in August. Now, I don't look at the old list. I start a brand new sheet. I grabbed the list of every player that I could name for fantasy football, and I come up with new rankings. This way, I'm not, swayed or influenced by my old rankings at all, and I look to see who rose and who sank in my rankings. So today, I found 4 players who have pretty significant drops in my rankings, and we're going to talk about why these guys dropped from my initial rankings back in May, going into draft season in early August. So the first sinking player I want to talk about is Derrick Henry, who was my RB3 back in May and is now my RB7 in early August. Now, I know you say that's not that big, right? I mean, 4 draft spots isn't huge. But comparing the RB3, who right now is like Bijan Robinson, going as maybe the 105, 106 pick, compared to the RB7, which just say it's Henry, that's going to be, a mid to early first round pick, now going to be an early to mid, second round pick. 4 draft spots for running backs, especially this year in fantasy football where receivers are going so much earlier than in previous seasons. It's a big difference. This offseason, heading into my May rankings, I wasn't that worried about the age. I went, dude, who cares? He's 29, but I mean, really, who cares? I care now. I'm worried. I'm I'm nervous about it. And, last year the offense was kind of falling apart. I mean, that Titans offense hasn't really been super elite for the last couple of years. Sure, they added DeAndre Hopkins, but, is DeAndre Hopkins the same player as he used to be? Everyone I hear talk about DeAndre Hopkins says, he lost his top speed, but he'll still eat in the middle of the field. That doesn't sound like a good wide receiver 1 for your team. Treylon Burks didn't show much last year. So I look at this offense and I go, that's limited again. And sure, maybe Henry does go out and get 350 touches and he just blows up and he's pretty much foolproof at that point, right? But, what if he breaks down? What if he gets injured? Henry is currently at almost 1,900 touches over his NFL career, right? I wanted to go back and I looked at what ages these running backs around the same amount of touch totals for their career, what age did they finally just fall off the map, right? And I didn't want to go to guys like in 1990. That was way too old. So I went from about 2008 range until current day. So let's start off the list with LaShawn McCoy, right? 2,200 total touches, washed at 29. MJD, 2200 total touches, washed at 28. Zeke Elliott, just under 2,200 total touches, washed at 28. Mark Ingram, who's in his 30s now, but at 2,100 total touches, hasn't been great in a few years. Le'Veon Bell, 1,900 total touches, washed at 28. DeMarco Murray, 1,900 touches, retired at 29. Melvin Gordon, 1,900 touches, washed at 29. Jonathan Stewart, 1,900 touches, washed at 30. So I just saw a whole list of guys who were elite at fantasy at one point or another hit the 900 total touch mark, and they're washed at 28, 29. So right now, Henry is heading into that mix right now where he might be washed. He might have 1 year left, but I'm just going to go, hey, I like Tony Pollard. I like Josh Jacobs. I like Nick Chubb. I like these guys going just in front of him. So if I have the opportunity, I'm passing on Henry as far as I can. Now, I'm not going to take Jonathan Taylor and Ramondre Stevenson over him because I'm not a crazy person, but Derrick Henry had to fall a little bit in my rankings for the bad offense and just for the fact that he's turning 29. He'll turn 30 in January. And I just gave you a pretty good track record of guys who were elite for fantasy football, who get major touches, fall off the cliff at 28, 29 years old. The next player I want to talk about is Deebo Samuel, who was my wide receiver 16 and is now my wide receiver 21. Now, 5 draft spots isn't huge, but that could be a round or 2 difference. That's how tight it is this year for fantasy football. We have a lot of quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs going in the mid rounds this year. So 5 draft spots is pretty significant. Deebo is one of the weirdest players in the NFL. 2 years ago, he put up 1,400 yards on 77 catches, which is pretty unbelievable. Plus, you got to bake in how many rushing yards he had that season as well. And last year, he kind of dudded out. He only played 13 games. He misses time, it seems, every year. If you average out even the games he did play over a 17-game season, he would have finished with 73 catches for 825 yards, 3 touchdowns. but only, and it would have had 303 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. So, how long can he keep up the gimmick of being a 50 carry player a year, which is random, maybe scoring some touchdowns, but really not being that great of an actual receiver, but being a beast after the catch? I just like Brandon Ayuk maybe in that offense a little bit better at going at wide receiver 18. So not super significantly higher, but a few spots higher. The San Francisco offense isn't made to carry big receivers. It's not. It's not made to be this shootout offense, right? They want to run the ball with Christian McCaffrey. They want to keep the ball short. And with Brock Purdy under center, I mean, listen, if you've been around the channel for a long time, I called the Brock Purdy kind of being a decent starter in the NFL. I called that back when I did a scouting report on him. You can check that video out if you want. But I just don't think he's the quarterback that's going to throw for 500 yards a game and, blow up. He's not going to be the guy who could do that. He's going to be the 210 quarterback with maybe 2 touchdowns and a pick a game. And he did good at managing the offense, and they ran through Christian McCaffrey. So I just think Deebo Samuel's upside is limited in an offense that doesn't want to throw the ball a ton, and 2 pass catchers, really 3 pass catchers who I think are better, Ayuk, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey. I'm good on Deebo Samuel this year. I want to rid myself of the San Francisco receiving core with Samuel just getting injured all the time and being, honestly, could be the 3rd or 4th option on a team. I think I'm good on Deebo Samuel this year, and that's why he dropped. Next guy I want to talk about is another receiver. Chris Godwin was my wide receiver 25, now my wide receiver 31. Another guy who dropped about 6 spots. The quarterback situation, it scares me, man. I talked myself into it in May where I went, dude, who cares who the quarterback is? He'll be fine. Like, he's a slot receiver. They'll pepper him with targets. But I can't believe in it when your quarterbacks are Kyle Trask, who hasn't really had any NFL run. And when I did a scouting report on him in college, I wasn't that impressed. He seemed okay. Like, he could run a basic offense and just be kind of a distributor. But, I mean, is that good for fantasy? No, not really. And Baker Mayfield, I think, is just kind of bad. So there's not a lot of positive outlook here. And nothing I've heard from camp is good about the quarterbacks. I've heard nothing but bad things about Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. Godwin is the slot receiver, so he's going to need volume to be really successful for fantasy. And last year with Brady, which, hey, Tom Brady is 10 times better than Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. He had 100 catches, 1,000 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Does it get much better with the other guys I just named? I just don't think so. I think the Bucs can potentially be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. I'm just good on the Godwin situation, man. Maybe full PPR. You can tempt me a little bit because he could have some weeks where he probably will catch 6 to 8 balls and he has a decent week. But a guy who isn't really a touchdown scorer, who's gonna need volume to really be effective for fantasy football, where you look at his running mate Mike Evans. Mike Evans could be, decent for fantasy because he'll have a couple blow-up weeks where he catches a touchdown and some bombs, but Godwin needs touches to be really valuable for fantasy. And with the current offense I think we have at quarterback, I just don't think we get it this year. And the last guy I want to talk about is Joe Burrow. And this one pains me because if I was starting an NFL franchise right now, it would be Patrick Mahomes at 1 and then Joe Burrow at 2, without a doubt. But we're talking about fantasy football. So back in May, I had him as my QB4. Now I have him as my QB6. Now you might say, oh, dude, it's only 2 draft spots, right? So QB4 to QB6. How different could it really be? You're really dropping or falling in rankings. But in the world of quarterback, especially in fantasy football, the QB4 to the QB6 is huge. Right now, the QB4 is going at pick 40, while the QB6 and 7 are going at pick 57 and 58. That's a round and a half later. That's huge for fantasy. That's a 4th to a 5th round pick. That could be a late 4th to a 6th round pick. Like I said, I like Joe Burrow a lot, but mix together the calf injury with me just really wanting someone with a lot of upside, which Joe Burrow has, but he doesn't have the rushing. He just doesn't have that rushing upside. He doesn't have that cheat code. Last year, Burrow had 8 weeks under 20 fantasy points. He had some good big blow-up weeks. I think he had 3 games over 30 points, which is awesome. But Jalen Hurts only had 2 games under 20 fantasy points. Justin Fields had 8, but he only threw 18 touchdowns last year, where Burrow threw 35. So rushing is king with fantasy quarterbacks. Now, Burrow has the chance to go out and throw for 40 touchdowns and be really great for fantasy. Of course he does. And he runs himself a little bit. He had 250 rushing yards last year, 5 touchdowns. But mixed together, him not being here for the whole preseason with his calf injury, not really having the rushing upside these other guys have, I like Joe Burrow as a real life NFL quarterback. Like I said, I would take him 2 overall. I would take Mahomes and then him if I was starting a franchise today. But for fantasy football, you need the rushing upside of quarterback. So that's why I dropped him below guys like Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. And he's going right before the likes of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert. So he's right in that mix for me this year. All right. And those are 4 players who have fallen in my fantasy rankings. I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. Comment down below if you made it this far, who you liked, who you don't like, who's fallen in your rankings. If you liked the video, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel. Plenty of content coming all over August as we're heading into draft season. So stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.